Our first drawing this week is going to be visualizing some simple forms in a space and thinking about the values that we can use to create push and pull. So what I said to do, I believe in the instructions, is using maybe a simple sphere or a cube or a cylinder in combination with one another. Right? Simple kind of three-dimensional forms. So the first thing that we want to do is make some quick little drawings where we're trying to think about the picture puzzle pieces of our drawing. Right? So if I'm using, let's say, a sphere and maybe a box, I can think about where are those things in space, and then I want to imagine them sitting maybe on a tabletop. So that's one kind of configuration. I want you to make multiple quick kind of gestural drawings where you're thinking about the placement of these objects in space and their position relative to the picture plane. Maybe in this one I have a tall kind of rectangular shape with the sphere sitting on the rectangle, and maybe a horizontal ground. I might decide I want more than one thing here. Maybe I decide I'm going to put another sphere in the picture plane. I would say you want at least two things, but perhaps more than two will make the drawing more interesting. This doesn't have to be realistic either. This is just from our imagination. The main thing being, I want you to think about the drawing as an arrangement of shapes within our larger rectangle, right? So if you look at this quick drawing, of course I've got this is a shape, this is a shape, this is an object, but this is a shape, part of that object. That's one plane of the object, another plane of the object, as well as the negative spaces. This is a shape. Then this is a shape. This is a shape, right? This is the, again, picture puzzle of our drawing. So I'm going to do one more here. I think I want my box still going off the picture plane, being cropped out on the bottom, but I think I want to see more of that on top. Maybe something like this. Maybe I add another box-like shape. Here again, we can use the idea of perspective drawing as a way to establish a space. And then, let's see, I think I'll have a sphere kind of behind it. And maybe I have another one kind of going off the picture plane like so. And then I'm going to establish kind of the angle, I think, of my surface that it's going to sit on. Go get rid of that line. That's not bad. There's this kind of directional movement this way in the picture plane. Right? So once you've got a composition you kind of like, then you're ready to start a larger drawing. And refer to the instructions again for all the specifics, but you're going to make a smaller drawing than the whole page. I think around 9 by 12 or somewhere in there. First thing I did was I made a little value scale, right, as a visual reminder of how light and how dark I could get. This is just a little 7-step scale. You can see there's the white of the paper there. And my darkest value, of course, is made with my ebony or my General's layout pencil by pressing as hard as I possibly can and layering the marks to make my black, right? I can't get a true black, but I can get a very, very dark gray with graphite. And then I'm using my other pencils to kind of get these gradual steps. This is a great little warm-up because it reminds me how light and how dark I can get in the drawing. And one goal then is to make sure I have each value somewhere in that drawing. Now I've started a drawing from another kind of composition that I worked up. And you can see I've started to make mine a little more complex. I had a very simple box here to begin with, but then I started to make these notches cut out of that box. This one on the corner. And then I have a couple other shapes that are here, right? What I'm doing in this drawing is starting to add values everywhere, right? And each shape, whether it is the plane of an object, or the continuous plane of a rounded surface, or the negative space, any shape needs to have shifting values. So we don't want to end up with just single flat values on each plane. We want to have multiple values within a plane. So you can see I made this edge just a little bit darker here as it's lighter here. You can see this tiny shape here. It's a little darker there, and it gradually gets a little lighter there. As I do this, similar to what we were doing last week, we want to keep all of our edges sharp, right? So even though we start with outlines, we want to get rid of all those outlines so that every shape is defined by value. So you can see how I've done that in the part of the drawing that I've refined here. I've got value to value and edge to edge relationships that all remain shape and yet remain sharp and yet have no outlines that define them. It's just value contrast, right? So I've got areas that have strong value contrast, strong dark to light. I've got areas that have moderate value contrast, dark to light, but not as light or not as dark. And then I have also some low contrast. This is a little lighter, this is a little darker, right? So I don't want you to end up with a drawing that is all high contrast. I don't want you to end up with a drawing that's all low contrast. I want you to have a range of high, moderate, and low in the whole drawing. And think about the ideas of compositional balance, of course, and all those compositional issues in terms of arrangement. Balance, of course, now relates to value. So if I have a really heavy and dark shape over here, I'm probably going to need to counter that somewhere else in the composition so that the drawing feels balanced, right? And as you work with graphite, of course, you want to gradually build up your darks, right? Start light and gradually get darker. And of course, to get lighter, you can use your stick erasers and you can use your kneaded eraser to kind of back off some of those maybe values that got a little too dark and you want them to go lighter, right? When you get really, really dark, it's harder to erase. Not impossible, just harder to erase. So be aware of that. We want the drawing to be a gradual thing that gradually gets darker and darker in the few places that we want it, right? Many of you last week, I think, struggled with using outlines, and the drawing still had strong outlines. Get rid of all the outlines so that there's nothing but value defining each shape and defining each edge, and keep those edges as sharp geometric shapes, crisp and defined by value.